Hi, I'm Chuck Cassidy, and for the last 8 years I've been converting school buses into homes on wheels and, well, everything else you can do in a bus. Today I've got a special treat for you, and I gotta be honest with you, I've had a little secret I've been keeping from y'all. That's right, I bought another bus, we gutted it, did a roof raise, and it's already sold and leaving the shop today, and I didn't share any of it with you. I'm gonna try to make it up for you today though. And before this bus gets out of here, I'm gonna do a side-by-side comparison of these two 7-window international buses. Now, they both say international on the front, they're both 7 windows long, but that's where the similarity's in. And I wanna share with you the differences so you can understand how two buses that appear identical, even after the roof raise, are actually quite different. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started taking a look at these awesome buses. If you've been following along on the build series about my own personal bus, you know that I love short buses built on full-size bus chassis, and that's why we picked this one up. They offer you all of the ruggedness and durability of a full-size bus, but the maneuverability and footprint of a short bus. It's the best of both worlds in my opinion. Now this bus here is an International 3800 series chassis, and it's got a t444e engine, which is also virtually the same engine as a Ford 7.3 Power Stroke. It's a turbo diesel V8, and it's got an electronically controlled injection system. Very different from the bus next door, built on the same chassis, but that bus has a DT466, all mechanically controlled, so there's no computers on there. And that engine is a straight 6, whereas this is a V8. This bus also features an Allison 2000 series transmission. It's an electronically controlled 5-speed transmission with overdrive and a lockup torque converter, and it couldn't be more different than the one in my bus, which is a 4-speed, non-computer controlled, non-locking torque converter, Allison AT545. Maybe not the best transmission in the world, if I'm being honest. The differences keep rolling though, because my bus is a Thomas, this one's a Bluebird, and additionally, this bus rides on a slightly different set of tires. These tires are a full size bigger. Go figure. I can't tell you why, but that's just how they are. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you know I'm not the biggest fan of V8s. You know I'm not the biggest fan of electronically controlled computers. But today I want to walk you through what's actually awesome about this bus and how I've changed my tune a little bit since we picked it up. Let's go take a look at the engine. Well, I feel like it was just yesterday where I was bad-mouthing this engine, but like I was just saying, I've changed my tune a little bit after driving this rig because it's actually kind of sweet. Take a look. So let's start with the basic engine topology. What kind of motor is this? What do I think about that? So it's a turbocharged V8 engine. I don't like V8 engines, especially in heavy-duty applications. The first reason is that it is not inherently balanced. Straight 6 is perfectly balanced, and it's a very smooth running engine. These actually require a harmonic balancer or some type of weights spinning to counteract the forces of the pistons moving up and down. Not the most elegant design. Also, because it's a V8, there are less main bearings there supporting the crankshaft. Straight 6 has 7. I believe this has 5, but I could be wrong, but it's not as many and it's got more cylinders. Bummer. The other problem with the V8 is that there's 2 of everything. So you have 2 cylinder heads, you have 2 cylinder head gaskets, you've got to have a timing chain or a timing gear that connects the 2, and that's just more opportunities for failure. Additionally, you've got 2 more cylinders, which means you've got 2 more injectors and all the costs associated with that. And this bus, because it has glow plugs, which are another thing I don't like, instead of having 6 glow plugs, you have 8 of them. What a bummer, am I right? The next thing on this, like I was saying before, it's computer controlled. I'm not a fan of computer controls, but because of the computer controls, I will say, for its size, 7.3 liters of displacement, it does make pretty good power. And in different applications, you can actually tune this engine up simply by loading a different tune into the computer. That's a pretty sweet way to gain some power. It will cost you longevity though in the long run. moving right along, because it's computer controlled, there's a whole slew of acronyms that follow this engine everywhere. And if you get on the forums, it's so hard to remember. You got your ICPs, your CPRs, your UVCHs, your HPOPs. They just keep coming, and that's because this thing is full of sensors and gizmos that supplement what is a pretty complex injection system. It uses a high pressure oil pump to hydraulically inject fuel through the fuel injectors, and those hydraulic injectors are controlled by a computer that activates a small electrical solenoid. So the name of this system is a HUE system. It's a hydraulically activated, electronically controlled unit injector. I think that's the acronym there. So look, the acronyms just keep going. On the other bus, there are no acronyms. It's just engine. The last thing that I don't like about this engine is its apparent bore engine. And what that means is that there are not sleeves in the cylinder liners. So when you wear this engine out, you can't just leave it in the bus, pop in a new set of cylinder liners, and be out the door with essentially a new engine. You have to pull the motor out. It needs to be rebored. You need to go with oversized pistons and rings. And frankly, most people don't do that. They'll just replace the whole engine. So that's, in my opinion, a pretty big drawback. I could do an in-frame rebuild on my bus, leave the motor in place. You know, there are guys out there who say they can do that rebuild in like a weekend. I'm not that skilled or that fast, but I would way rather have a bus that is set up like that than have to rely on this one, taking the engine, taking it to a machine shop, you name it. The last thing about this bus that I can't stand as far as its engine is that International, in all of their infinite wisdom, decided to put a wiring harness underneath the valve covers of the motor. And that wiring harness is really important. It not only sends power to the glow plugs, it also controls those electronically controlled injectors I was talking about. Those under valve cover wiring harnesses are notorious for creating problems that may or may not be impossible to troubleshoot quickly, because you could have an intermittent short under the valve cover, and the only way to see it is to pull the valve cover, and you don't really want to run the motor with the valve cover off. Luckily, this platform, the motor is really accessible, but because this engine is also in cutaway vans, a lot of the short buses that you see that have this motor, those are so frustratingly hard to work on. It can be a 10-hour job to replace the glow plugs on that, whereas you could do that job on this bus here in half the time. So that's my list of gripes. However, this motor does run really well. And if you have good batteries and a proper functioning glow plug system, it starts up great in the cold. But if you don't, it's sometimes not going to start at all. Now, what are some of the benefits and advantages of this motor? Well, what's nice, because it's essentially the same engine as a Ford 7.3, finding parts for this engine is pretty simple. So all of those acronym sensors I was talking about, you can usually get them at a place like Napa or a Ford dealership if you're in a bind. That's really nice. On my big International over here, those parts aren't generally stocked at your average auto store, and I have to get them either online and order them, which can be almost impossible when you're broken down on the side of the road, or I have to go to the International dealership. That's a real bummer. Because this motor was also in Ford pickup trucks, and you know, truck guys and their, you know, attachment to them as a symbol of their masculinity, have spent a lot of time documenting all the problems and issues and how to make these engines more reliable, how to get more out of them, how to do repairs. That's really nice. You know, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would have to say there's got to be at least quadruple the number of these motors in existence than the t444e that's in my bus. So the support, the parts network, it's there, and that's really good. The last thing to talk about, because of that injection system I mentioned that uses engine oil to operate the injectors, you can't run this motor if it's out of oil, which is really cool. I mean, granted, you should probably be checking your oil enough to not be surprised by a sudden drop in your oil levels, but if you're the type of person who doesn't stay up on their maintenance, you won't destroy the engine that way. That's kind of nice. Now, this engine in particular, being as low miles and low hours as it is, it's one of the most powerful 7.3s or t444es I've driven, and it's a rocket in this bus. This bus is only 7 windows long. I just weighed it today. It only weighs 13,000 pounds, And between that and the fact that this Allison transmission allowed Bluebird or International, whoever spec'd it, to put a high numerical ratio rear end gear set on this, means that it's got crazy good acceleration and it can still pull off highway speeds. So it drives awesome. It makes good power. This engine has a lot of life left in it. There's almost no blow by. So is it my favorite motor? No. Is it a great motor in this application? Yes. Now, if this was a 40-foot bus, these motors are notorious for being dogs, but they're still put in those big buses and they'll get by, but I would never recommend this motor in a 40-foot bus. But in a short bus like this, some of the advantages of having a more popular motor that has more support and the fact that it runs so smoothly and makes good power, in my opinion, can offset the fact that it's maybe not the best motor from an overall design and foundation standpoint. Whew. Thanks for coming to my rant about the T444e and everything that I love and everything that I hate about it. Let's talk about the rest of this bus. This bus, while it is an International chassis, it's actually got a Bluebird body on it. And I really have a strong preference for the old Bird here. The biggest reason I like them is if you look down these walls, they go straight up and down. I'll take you over to my Thomas. And this Thomas bus, for some reason, at the factory where Thomas built buses, they decided to make these walls slope inward. I don't get it. It's obnoxious when you're building out the interior, but they made up for it by using screws on all of their interior ceiling panels, whereas Bluebird uses rivets. Now, rivets are probably the superior fastener, but because we're always dropping those ceiling panels, I don't mind the fact that Thomas used screws. The other thing that Thomas does right when you're doing a conversion is this gutter across the top here. It's all one piece and it's solid. Come over here, and Bluebird, they really like stamping metal parts and picking up the style points. They've got these cute little eyebrows over every window, which is fine until you do something like we have here, where we cut in a double wide window, and it gets a little silly right there because, well, you see what's going on. So some people will often, cut these eyebrows off. I don't love doing that though, because then any rainwater that you have coming down the side of your bus is just going to roll straight onto the side and not be deflected off everywhere, which was why these were put on here in the first place. So kind of a bummer. Another thing I like about Bluebirds, you see how the back of this bus has this cool stamped pattern on it? This is just mostly aesthetic. It does make it a little stronger. Thomas, they just went with a straight back. It's not stamped. It's not that cool. I don't know. The last thing I got to go over, and this one really drives me nuts. For some reason, Thomas put their windshield wipers up top. I actually flipped these around because in the original configuration, when these wipers were in the park position, this one would be over here, which is right above the steering wheel, right in your face, staring right at it. It means when you do a conversion, you have these wiper motors up here if you're trying to do a shelf or something cool up there. Well, gosh dang it, that gets really annoying. Look at Bluebird. They got it right. Wipers down low, right where you want them, out of the way, out of sight, out of mind. I don't know why Thomas didn't do it that way, but it drives me crazy. Oh, and I almost forgot, perhaps the worst part about a Thomas bus. Ooh, and can I get to it? Now, I'm gonna zoom in. Take a look at what they did on the top of that roof. They got these rub rail doodads on there with 1,001 screws holding it down. All kinds of places for water to leak in. Now let's look at the Bluebird. One smooth sheet wrapped completely over, and they do another nice little thing with their stamping. You see how on the edge here, they have a little bend in where it curls under? That's to help seal it up and keep it a little more watertight. Nice. So nice. As I was saying before on these 7.3s, it's really imperative that you have as many cold cranking amps in your battery bank as possible. So when we picked this up, it only had 2 batteries and they were getting pretty weak, and it was really having a hard time firing off. So we replaced it with 3 brand new Group 31 batteries. So we've got about 2,700 cold cranking amps available to this engine, and it lights up in a hurry. Check this out. I thought I'd pull the bus outside to talk about tires and brakes. Another way that this bus is very different than mine, like I said, is that it actually is running a different size tires than my bus. Go figure. We've got 11R22.5 shoes on this bad boy. My bus only has these little 10s. Again, that's just a decision that Bluebird would have made at the factory, and I have noticed that historically, Bluebirds, even the short buses, run the big tires, the same size big tires as their full-size buses, whereas Thomas, they would actually run smaller tires and shrink them down as the size of the bus shrank. I'm partial to having the big tires, but the trade-off is, of course, they're more expensive. I know I spent a good amount of time ranting and raving about the engine connected to the go pedal, but I want to take a second and talk about what's connected to the stop pedal. Another way that this bus is very different than mine is that this bus actually uses hydraulic brakes, just like the brakes in your car, which means it's got this big old emergency brake lever too. That's nice, especially if you're not experienced with running on air brakes, because hydraulic brakes actually give you a little bit more of a feel than air brakes do. And air brakes have just the slightest delay from when you apply them to when the stopping happens. And that's because the air system has to energize, lengths of tubing down to the brakes, which might be all the way in the back of the bus. That's usually where there's brakes, So the hydraulics have a little better feel. Now, the thing I don't like about hydraulic brakes is the systems are more complicated. If you have leaks, the hydraulic fluid can leak out, and they're not a fail-safe system. So air brakes, when they fail because they have leaks or run out of air, they fail in the set position and it will stop you. These brakes, just like the brakes on your car, if you run out of fluid because a line breaks or something like that, you're in a very dangerous situation because you just lost your brakes. Additionally, for safety's sake, this bus features an electronic hydraulic boost system. So these brakes require a booster to deliver adequate stopping power. Well, if the engine should die and you need to stop the bus, this bus has an electric pump that kicks on, and you'll hear it right now. You hear that? It's a whole nother system required just for emergency braking if the engine dies. So these systems are more complicated, more expensive, parts are harder to find. The driving feels a little bit more like a conventional car, but to me, I'm always going to be an air brakes guy. The last thing I got to talk about are the exceptionally low hours on this. So just like my bus, this engine is going to run for a long time. It's only got 7,550 hours and 159,000 miles. That's really great. That means this bus is going to provide years of dependable service for the new owner. And just like the bus that I'm going to be calling home, which has actually a brand new engine put in it, they'll be able to get a lot of use out of this. If you look over here on the transmission, if you look at those numbers, we've got D421. That means that this is a 5-speed transmission. You've got your D, which is overdrive or normal driving position. Fourth gear, it skips over third and gives you the option to manually select second or first. Love the overdrive features. The transmission on this bus is one area where I'm really envious. However, it's an electronically controlled transmission, and the problem with that is you've got a computer, you've got sensors, and you've got a whole lot of things that can go wrong. The last perk that I love about this bus is it's got cruise control. Are you kidding me? I kid you not. I would die for cruise control in my bus. I can add it, and you don't have to have a computerized engine to have cruise control, but it makes it a lot easier if you do, and so they threw it on. Pretty jealous of that one. Since we stepped in here, I thought I'd show you how they're picking it up. So just like on my bus, they have the 4 inches of insulated subfloor with the Advantech subfloor material, and then we went ahead and installed dual pane insulated RV windows with screens for them. This bus is ready to be framed, mechanically installed with all of the plumbing and electrical, insulated, built out, and lived in. This is the International DT466 in my 1996 International Thomas Schoolie. And as you can see, it is a straight 6-cylinder arrangement. So it's just all going back. And instead of having a computer, it has what I would call the mechanical brain of this bus, which is this Bosch P-pump, all mechanical injection pump. It's driven by the timing gears off the engine, not high pressure oil, and it's controlled by the governor springs and the fuel delivery valve, which is operated by the accelerator pedal, to deliver flow through these tubes to the 6 cylinders and 6 injectors on the bus. Quite a bit simpler and easier to troubleshoot, and lucky for me, this engine is basically brand new. Below that, you can see the air compressor for the air brake system. So while you do have a whole component, which is the air compressor, it gives you a braking system that, in my opinion, is actually simpler because you have all the parts right here, air operated. And if these hoses leak, it's not going to mean the loss of braking power. Really important to me for safety. And also, like I mentioned before, this transmission, it's only a 4-speed. So our drive is followed by 3, 2, and 1. And that's because it does not have overdrive. Kind of a bummer. The cool thing about this bus, though, the chassis and body only have 162,000 miles on it. So still low miles. And when you add to that the fact that this engine right out here was installed brand new from Reviva in 2017, this bus should be good for a long time. And because there are no computer controls on this, in fact, the way you turn the engine off is you actually pull this lever out and it kills the fuel to it. Go figure. And like I was saying, we don't have glow plugs. So if you want to start this, you can just... No waiting for glow plugs. Pretty fantastic. Well, I hope you can forgive me for keeping you in the dark about this awesome bus for so long. But, you know, that's just how life goes sometimes. Thanks for watching. I thought this was a really cool video that I got to shoot because it's not every day that you have two very similar buses, each with a 12-inch roof raise, each very desirable for their own reasons, and still with a lot of differences that the untrained eye might not notice. I wanted to take this as an opportunity to share with you all of the things that you can look out for when you're bus shopping, because it's not just a 7-window and forget about the rest. You got to think about the engine, the transmission, the chassis, who was the coach manufacturer, and even the braking system all come into play when you're trying to find the perfect rig for your schoolie home. Thank you for watching. If you like this kind of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll catch you next time.